Hi again, everyone. Welcome to this webinar of the International Crime Prevention through Environmental Design Association, the ICA. For those of you who don't know, the ICA is a professional non-profit global organization, and we deal with everything related to CPTED, or crime prevention through environmental design. This webinar is one of many programs run by the ICA in trying to assist in reducing crime and creating safer places. My name is Tinus Kruger. I'm the Executive Director of the ICA. I'm based in South Africa, and I know for some of you this is either very early in the morning or late at night, so we appreciate you attending. Just a few administrative issues. Please make sure that your microphones are switched off or are muted. You are welcome to introduce yourself in the chat. You can use the chat function to tell us who you are and where you're from. Then when we have the presentations, please make use of the Q&A function. It's also at the bottom of your screen. There's a button that says Q&A, and you can use that to post questions or comments, and then the participants, the panelists, will deal with that later. So we invite you to take advantage of the many programs that we offer as the ICA. Please join us. You can use the link provided on the screen, or you can contact us if you have any questions. One of the programs that we share with you, or that you will be able to make use of, is the Individual Certification for CPTED Professionals program. You can go to the website on the screen, that's mentioned on the screen. We also do the same for course accreditation for CPTED courses. More than welcome to join us and get more information on that. Then we would like you to please, if you don't mind, fill in the survey. It's not a long survey. It's very easy and quick to assist us in making our webinars more appropriate and to improve what we do in our webinars. You can do that by either going to that URL or just using this QR code. We would also just like to make you aware of this disclaimer. You see it on your screen, but in essence, the views expressed in these presentations are those of guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the position of the ICA. We don't assume any legal responsibility for the speakers' statements, and we also do not assume ownership of intellectual property, accuracy, or validity of presented information. We would like you to be aware of that. And then if you want to get in touch with us, you are more than welcome. We are on social media. So let's start, and I would like to welcome you, all of you again, especially our distinguished presenters and our moderator, Dr. Manjari Kapoor, who will now introduce these speakers and participants to us, and I therefore hand over to you, Manjari. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tinus, and I welcome everybody from across the globe to the first ever ICA webinar, which is part of the Urban October initiative by the UN Habitat. So I'm very happy to share with all our regular and not so regular viewers that this is an outcome of the efforts, joint collaborative efforts and initiatives, the coming together of the ICA and the UN Habitat, which is evolving and unfolding as we are conducting this webinar. I will let Juma talk more about that, but like very rightly mentioned by Tinus himself, it's my honor and privilege really to be introducing our really, really esteemed panel to the rest of the world going forward. And we hope that this will culminate, take the discussion and dialogue way further. We had a similar webinar last year for those who are regulars with us. And this is, you will find an evolved version of that. So, allow me to first welcome our guests for the day. Uh, of course, the first one, a co host with us, is our representative from UN Habitat, Juma Asiago. You would have already read the short bios on the poster, but I'll briefly introduce that he's an urbanist and social scientist and a graduate in sustainable urban development from the University of Oxford. He is currently a program management officer, housing and human security at the land, housing and shelter section of the UN Habitat, and he will be guiding us forward through the webinar very, very pivotally. Of course, another very valuable guest for the day is John Maynard, who is a crime and community safety specialist with a focus on making and shaping safer towns and cities, who has been working in the field for over 20 years. John has authored multiple local crime prevention plans and strategies. He is from Sydney, but he will be showcasing way beyond just Sydney. Then it is my extreme honor and privilege to introduce now to you our ICA president, a very good friend of mine, colleague, mentor, you can call her what you like, but she is the backbone of the ICA, and it is my great honor and privilege to be introducing her. She's an architect just like me, and with a doctorate in urbanism, and been a very, very dynamic president of the ICA. She has years of sceptred practice, should I say decades of accepted practice in the Hispanic and region especially, but also the rest of the world and in Americas. So she with Tim. Tim is again extremely good friend and a veteran, should I say, at CPTED. He's a community safety researcher for more than quarter of a century, carrying out qualitative and quantitative research and evaluation in the United Kingdom. He has a particular interest in designing and managing out crime, and everyone, all of us, always benefit from the wisdom he brings to the table, always. So, then, okay, I will also have to introduce myself. I am, for those who don't know, Dr. Manjari Khanna Kapoor. I am the Vice President of the ICA and also the President of the Indian chapter, which is called ABS India. I'm an architect, academician, and a major scepted advocate in India, involved in national and international research and advocacy programs in various roles. I would try to bring to the table the Indian example as we go forward. So, having said that, I think it is also time to kind of introduce the concept of this webinar. So, what we are talking about here is a kind of an initiative which is a joint effort of the UN Habitat and ICA, which is about CPTED cities. So basically, what we are doing is we are setting out to explore the value and relevance of CPTED in cities, and in alignment with the current focus area of UN Habitat, we would like to specifically focus on housing. So, while of course we know that cities in general are a large majority is taken up by housing, and the way people live and the way people conduct themselves in their day-to-day housing tends to impact the city on a much greater scale than maybe any other kind of part of the city. So we had invited, a lot of you may be aware, we had invited entries for this study from across the world, and uh, for evidencing and documenting these. And it's in response to those submissions that we are now going the next step. And I will first and foremost take this to our, our guiding light, Juma Asiago, to tell us more about this aspect.
Thank you, Dr. Manjari, and happy United Nations Day to all of you.
Oh, wow.
It is October 24th.
Wonderful.
Um,
What an auspicious day.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Now, maybe just as a context setting, uh, this is also part of what we call the Urban October month, which is an opportunity for everyone to be part of the conversation about the challenges and opportunities created by the fast rate of change in cities and towns. And just to understand that each October, every year, everyone interested in sustainable urbanization, whether it's national, local governments, universities, NGOs, um, are encouraged to come together to really look at the transformational changes that are going on in cities. Um, this also comes at a time when we will be having the World Cities Day on the 31st of October, which will be held in Bogota, Colombia. Again, a city that is very well known within this area and context that we're speaking to today, and whose main focus will be around the people-centered smart cities. I raise all this because it's all part of the agenda setting, and also another cog to raise as a kind of preamble to this is to note that we are on the road to the next World Urban Forum, which takes place in May next year in Azerbaijan, in which the theme of the whole forum is now around housing the world towards safe, resilient cities and communities. That underscores the importance of the subject matter that we're talking about here today. And to really know that what we are attempting to do here is to profile better accepted in the eyes of the city as a whole. The city as a system of urban planning, of urban management, of urban governance, and look at how those systems are actually delivered at the level of land, housing, infrastructure, and basic services. Uh, why housing? It is important for us to understand that housing today is really the manifest of the global crisis we're experiencing. The global housing crisis isn't just looming; it's already here. We see people across the world living without basic infrastructure, secure shelter, or any formal recognition. The scale is daunting. We talk about 1.1 billion people living in informal settlements or slums, 1.6 billion facing housing affordability challenges, and around 300 million experiencing homelessness. So the urgency to localize and accelerate the SDGs remains clear. In 2015, for the first time, cities recognized safety as one of the key aspirations. The SDG 11 goal that is geared towards making cities safer, resilient, inclusive, has been the driver to everyday actions today in cities and towns over the past 10 plus years. The centrality of housing as a cornerstone for realizing the SDGs and at the center of a new social contract as a foundation for dignity, inclusion, and sustainability has been reiterated over and over again by mayors across the world. We now begin to understand local governments as the key drivers of systemic transformation with coalitions and collaborations of other stakeholders. In this space, we can now say that adequate housing, which is really the driving point, and CPTED can be seen as interconnected goals that can be achieved through comprehensive urban planning, policy, and community involvement. All around the world, the culture of prevention has already taken root in terms of the prevention of crime and violence, in terms of the prevention of natural and man-made disasters, in terms of the prevention of informal settlements and slums. We now have a multidimensional way to connect these areas of insecurity and ensure that a concept like CPTED is firmly integrated into these broader urban interventions towards the production of the city that we define as safe, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. I welcome you all to this discussion, and I hope that the upcoming panel presentations will enable us to see some of the elements of why CPTED and why cities. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Juma. And yes, that is a very important thing that probably I missed out, that this, despite being one of many ICA webinars, it is the first one under the Urban October aegis, and that's why it is extra special. Also, thank you for setting the tone and the stage for this. Just one point, as we go along, I request all the viewers to kindly post their questions in the question and answer session, and we'll be taking them at the end of the panel discussion. So we will start with a very relevant presentation from the President, Mecca, along with Tim, and then we will get into a panel discussion for all of us, which will then be followed by the Q&A session. Of course, we will keep ourselves as brief as possible. Right. So, Mecca, do you want to get into your presentation right away?
Yes, my dear. So thank you, dear Manjari, for the great work you are doing, moderating and leading the webinar committee of the International CPTED Association. Thank you, Yuma, for the introduction and all the support you are giving to the ICA to connect CPTED with UN Habitat's goals and actions. That is very relevant. And I'm so honored to be with so esteemed colleagues. So thank you for that. I will present a very interesting case study that is very tiny. It's not a big project, but it's an interesting example of how we can connect CPTED and the SDGs goals of UN. So this is the Coyhaique Quebrada La Cruz project in Patagonia in the south region of Chile. And this project started many years ago together with different colleagues. In the year 2016 until year 2020, it was the first period of this project that I developed together with the municipality of Coyhaique, with architect Paola Azócar, and also with Dr. Tim Pascoe that is here present, and also with Dr. Francisco Gatica and Ivan Cartes from the Bio University in Chile. And as you can see in the picture, we talked about a public space that is very interesting in a hill, but is surrounded by housing settlements. And this make this Quebrada La Cruz a very interesting project for social cohesion, for urban safety interventions. The first period of intervention produced in a participatory way the first master plan of intervention. And then, after we gather much scientific evidence of impact evaluation of the CPTED intervention and master plan, a very big program, a national government program in Chile called Quiero Mi Barrio, from the housing ministry, took the project and delivered it in a second master plan that I will describe today, led by Daniela Olmos and all the Quiero Mi Barrio team from Chile. As you have learned, I imagine, from the past ICA masterclasses, we have an ISO CPTED standard since year 2021. And I am so happy to say that this project aligns totally with the ISO CPTED standard that guide us through a CPTED process. I think this is something very interesting with a scan, phase, prioritize, variables, analyze, task, intervene, assess, and learn. So the idea is to produce CPTED interventions based on evidence. We used a research methodology, a quasi-experimental methodology. We applied a survey to get a baseline of indicators, environmental indicators, that ask people, the communities from this housing that surrounds Quebrada La Cruz, about victimization and also fear perception of crime. And we produced with that the line base of indicators in the year 2016. And then we repeat the measure each 2 years after the interventions in the field. As you can see, all the impact evaluation model was very participatory. We defined the sample together with Dr. Tim Pascoe and the colleagues from the University of Bio here in Chile. And the sample was very interesting because we applied this survey about victimization variables and fear perception, but also we applied some instrument for the diagnosis process that we called qualitative instruments, like Cloud of Dreams instrument. For example, we did also exploratory march in the fields to see how people see the opportunity to produce a park in this Quebrada La Cruz. The case study was interesting, and it was promoted also in a regional and in a municipal level, also with media press. The first master plan, as you can see, was a proposal that offers a renewed design of the Quebrada La Cruz with some soccer field, new soccer field, some gardening, some areas for vegetables selling, for example. And it was very interesting. And what we did in that opportunity, we start with lighting, public lighting and safe routes in the perimeter of the Quebrada La Cruz, with much community participation, as you can see. And we did some measures. It was interesting because we see interesting decrease, for example, in some crime, opportunity of crime, like some robberies, for example, especially against women. That was interesting. But what was very clear was the decrease of fear perception of people from these housing projects that needed to move from one side to another of the Quebrada La Cruz. Also, we could correlate some very specific spaces like bus stops, some streets, some community housing, for example, together with a spatial localization of crime and fear. It was interesting. Also, we discovered some risk factors connected with alcohol consume and drug consume. With all this information, in the first period, we developed with Dr. Tim Pascoe and the team from University Bio accepted impact evaluation model that is unique and is the pioneer model of accepted impact evaluation in the Hispanic region. And we produced this book that you can see online. But what was very interesting, with all this information, with all this citizens' participation, we produced much evidence. And with that evidence, the community, they apply to the government program, the Quiero Mi Barrio, and they win the program. So a second phase started in the year 2021, and they produced a very interesting second master plan. The second master plan took some ideas from the first master plan, for example, all the soccer playground and everything, but also it connected much actions with children and nature. For example, how to teach them to take care of nature, how to teach them to recognize species, different trees, animals. It was a very, very interesting work. Also continues with the installation of playgrounds. As you can see, the new master plan has a much more stronger view of ecosystem and nature balance. It was very interesting. What can we say as conclusions? As you have seen, this tiny little project that involves many actors in different levels, as the ISO CPTED standards suggest, the community level, the municipal level, the government level, also connects with many SDGs. SDGs for peace, SDGs for water cleaning, SDGs for sustainable environments. So this is something that we think it's very relevant. And this tiny project has shown us that CPTED methodology can have a positive impact on the territory and communities and housing projects when we apply it based on evidence, when we use the ISO CPTED standard, and when we can evaluate the impact of the interventions. Evidence-based CPTED can is a very, very relevant part of the public housing policy here in Chile. So I hope this is a useful example, and I will be happy to respond your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maka. I think you've set the tone for the first part of our panel discussion, which is what we are trying to lead up to, is about why is CPTED critical to housing practices and policies and projects. So this is our first focus area for the day. We will follow it up with two further to get good, productive, and actionable things out of this webinar, hopefully. So, based on your presentation and based on whatever you have, obviously underlining the point that yes, CPTED is critical to housing and development across the world. So I'll like to take this question now to John. John, would you like to add something about it? And do you need the slides now? Do you want me to share your slides?
No, not just yet.
Just tell me whenever
Yeah,
you want. Yeah.
sure. Okay. Thanks, Manjari, and thank you, Marco. I mean, I think it's those very sort of simple grassroots projects that just show you and just really demonstrate how a whole lot of small things put together can make these small incremental change, which, as you say, with enough of the right actors in play, making sure that these processes are participatory. People have that sense of ownership. They're empowered to get involved. Then we can affect change. So I think it's a really inspiring presentation. So I thank you for that. As I say, it's often all those small things put together that make the differences. It's not always easy to quantify or qualify those things either. Are we referring to a specific question now, Manjari, other than the presentation?
Yes. Why is CPTED critical to housing practices, policies, and projects?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Well, firstly, I think if you have some level of trust in the quality of the building that you live in, that it's been constructed properly, that it's been planned and designed and managed and maintained to an acceptable level, if you know it can deter crime, then you're going to have some sense of safety and security by simply living in that dwelling. That's a massive thing, obviously, as Juma alluded to, the levels of homelessness at the moment, people couch surfing, people living in substandard housing that isn't constructed and built to an acceptable level, informal settlements and so forth. And really, if you have those sort of secure, well-constructed housing that does deter crime, then people are going to want to stay in those places too. And I think that's really important too, because if you reduce turnover in communities, then you increase the capacity of the people who live there to really cement their relationships. The second point I'd make is that in terms of how CPTED being critical to housing, CPTED's a very versatile concept. It's a very kind of pragmatic approach. CPTED can be applied to all different kinds of housing. It can be applied to anything from your sort of low density suburban home, your terrace house, right through to your medium density, high density skyscrapers, or even gated communities if that's your thing. But CPTED really does have broad application, not just in housing practice. Of course, there's many other settings that it can also be applied in when we're looking at those broader agendas relating to livability, public health, and sustainability that, again, Juma alluded to. We often say that community safety, crime prevention is like charity. It begins at home. It's a shared responsibility. And when we talk about second generation CPTED, we're really talking about those relationships that we share or don't share with the people that we live amongst. And we often say that, the best weapon we have in creating safer communities is a planned and united community effort. So these notions of social cohesion, community connectedness, positive relationships at that micro level really underpin what makes for a safe community. And it's often overlooked. And our neighbours are a bit like family, aren't they? We don't get to choose who they are. And it's not always easy to necessarily like your neighbours. But nevertheless, knowing your neighbours, knowing that someone's looking out for you, knowing that if something happens that they have your back, is a really reassuring presence that, again, makes people feel safe in their communities. Thirdly, I'll say just on the social cohesion note, and again, this kind of relates to Macca's presentation too, these notions that CPTED relates to community development. So once you empower residents to get involved, whether it's through neighbourhood associations, community projects, tenants, unions, and so forth, then you do build that social capital and you can find local solutions to local community safety issues, which is always, to my mind, the best way of resolving these issues where possible, and not requiring the intervention of government if possible as well. Fourthly, I would say that CPTED is something that espouses equality. It's an inclusive concept. So we support a diversity of people in a range of different housing typologies in our communities, living together on a range of incomes. Because communities are all about preventing notions of enclaves of privilege or nominally enclaves of poverty. We want to reduce those spatial inequalities and have people from all walks of life living together. That's how we promote peace. That's how we promote harmony. The UN says itself that we can't have peace and security and sustainability, and we can't have sustainability without peace and security. So those two things are interchangeable. So while CPTED aims to design out crime, at the same time, we're trying to design in quality of life.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. And I see, Tim, you have your hand up, and it is your turn to add to whatever Macca said and from your own perspective. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Manjari. Thank you, John, and obviously thank you, Macca. I think Macca and John have clearly shown that CPTED works very effectively from the bottom up, but also when we're looking at cities and countries and regions, we need to look at going from the top down as well, and CPTED works there as well. So we know CPTED is kind of vital to our housing practice because it embeds safety, sustainability, community. So if we're looking at a city or a country level, it builds into policy alignment for housing, for example. For an example, in the UK, our national planning policy frameworks allow need housing to be safe and inclusive, and CPTED is one way of proving that in an evidence-based approach. So clearly we can now show that it reduces crime and fear. We can show that it's provides economic and social benefits, both directly, like, I don't know, lower maintenance costs, improved property values, reduced tenant turnover in a very economic sense, but also it creates safer environments, so people are going to work there, they're going to feel more inclusive, more sustainable. So it hits policy alignment, it reduces crime and fear in an evidence-based approach, it provides economic and social benefits. And as both our guys and ladies said, it's an inclusive and sustainable community. So CPTED's it's a cornerstone of good housing policy and practice, we'd like to say, in the UK, because it integrates safety, inclusion and sustainability into the heart of our housing development in an evidence-based way. And we now have all the tools, like Macarena was suggesting, to evidence that. And we've got ISOs, international standards, European standards, which give you the actual process to do that. And that process is slip immediately into housing and how housing policy and housing development works already. So it's a natural tool that CPTED just slips into. That's it. Sure if I've lost everybody.
Manjari, you are muted.
You're done, Tim? Okay, I had shared,
Yeah,
so I
I'm
will.
done. My connection's a bit broken.
All right, fine. That's okay. So I had shared my slide just to bring in the Indian perspective and to complete our one revolution around the globe, right from Australia to Latin America to Europe and coming to Asia, India. So I'd like to bring this example in as an example of traditional culture of a very socio-economically disadvantaged context where we have huge gender inequities and a huge housing shortage too. As you all may be aware, we are the most populated country in the world. And in that context, very briefly, without diving deep into each subject, I would like to bring in the relevance of CPTED, especially to housing and UN habitat, under the framework of the UN SDGs first and foremost. So, of course, we have gender equality is an aspirational goal for us, and for a developing country and a socio-economically challenged country like India, the way forward to fight with poverty is through economical development, generating more opportunities, capacity building, and for that we need infrastructure. The infrastructure has to offer a certain amount of stability and a certain amount of security for it to be viable, whether it is for foreign direct investments or for any other kind of aid. So obviously we all understand crime prevention, secure is the first aspirational goal, also the goal number 5 and 9 of the UN SDGs. Now, automatically, hoping that CPTED kicks in and the world in India is more secure, we expect a direct impact on the goal 8, which would generate decent work and inadvertently result in economic growth. This, according to us in India, is the shortcut to the goals number 1, 2, and 3, where we expect that because of economic development, there will be no poverty, there will be zero hunger. We are already almost there. And we expect people to have good health and well being, feeling secure. Living without crime is, I think, we think prerequisites to good health. And what we expect is that this would lead to reduced inequalities, and the CPTED framework, which is already very common and very natural in India, would create more sustainable cities and communities, continuing in the heritage way rather than what we'll be losing, as we'll see in the next panel discussion. So what we expect is that this would encourage peace and justice, build stronger institutions which are evolving within India. And as we'll see, we would need a lot of partnerships to meet these goals. So according to us, CPTED is critical to achieving all of these highlighted SDGs in the housing sector. Now, those of you familiar with the Indian socio-economic structure know that we have huge disparity between the various classes, so to say, where we have high income group, which is probably holding only about 1% of the population, but responsible for the major wealth. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have the lower income and the poor sections, which constitute more than 50% of the entire population. So what we're looking for when we say housing, and we say housing for all, when you see the first picture on your screen, this is how the top strata of society lives, which is just less than 1%. And then you have gated communities like the one in the picture below that are now a common sight in India, which is catering to the urban and the middle classes. But what we are talking about here, or rather concerned more about, is that most of this development is happening as gated communities. So the development authorities, they identify parcels of land, they auction them, and then these are developed for as housing for the elite or the upper middle class, as traditional or gated communities with very high security. What we are talking about is this strata of society, which is more than 50% of the population in India, and they are the ones with the highest housing demand. So that is why we have something called the Prime Minister's Affordable Housing Scheme, which is called PMA. And we are in that, coming up with housings like the one on your screen. Now, if you understand, these are low rise to keep the costs low, to keep the maintenance low, but these are missing on many very, very vital septed aspects, which make them affordable, because security is unaffordable. But if we were to feed in simple septed principles into this, they would probably go a longer way in creating more livable and better urban conditions. On the other hand, we have this again, which is an urban affordable housing, but not that affordable. This is probably only for the lower income group and not so much for the economically weaker, the lowest sections of the Indian population. So they also are gated, they are also affordable, but they are missing some septed features while keeping some. So we feel that if septed features were to be more inherent, then the exclusion and the unsustainability that these tend to offer will probably be to a large extent expunged. So what we're talking about here is the aspects of affordability, habitability. So affordability, usually gated communities tend to be very, very security intensive, which makes them very expensive. The affordability aspect gets diluted. However, if we were to take septed principles into it, that would not be an additional cost. It would be taken care for in design. Similarly, habitability, septed principles, if they were to be kept into affordable housing, they will make them more livable and obviously more safe. These are expected to be more inclusive and non-discriminatory, so that they will be more accessible. And in the context and in the socio-economic context of the places, of course, if you have a neighborhood that is designed with septet principles, it will tend to feed both the industry and the residential. They would be kind of a sustainable unit. And of course, cultural adequacy is something that is a given. So I will stop my uh, answer to this point. And at this point, I would like to introduce our next discussion point, which was actually the moot point of our entire project, is to kind of demonstrate that how does septed really directly or indirectly impact cities. And I'll take this question first and foremost to Maka or Tim, whoever wants to take that first.
I can go
Yeah,
with the
please go ahead.
question.
Yeah.
My experience, this last 25 years is that a well-applied CPTED strategy, and for that you need to learn CPTED, and if you can certify it as a CPTED practitioner, impacts incredible high ICT. How? It impacts because it achieves many objectives. For example, it reduces opportunity of crime if it is a well-applied strategy, CPTED strategy. Of course, it reduces fear perception. It gathers social cohesion also, and it helps municipal teams, for example, to apply programs, municipal programs and federal programs or national programs in a very evidence-based way. So in my experience, it impacts very well.
Thanks, Mecca. That was really nice and concise, and I appreciate your brevity for that. And yes, I would really appreciate if everybody can be brief as possible. I'll take the question to John now. And if John, you can share some examples in support of your answer, that will be great.
Yes,
Let me know
certainly.
when you want me to share your slides.
CPTED is a common sense, it's a pragmatic approach, it's adaptable, it's flexible, it's human-centered, it's participatory. So all of these processes are really key to how we make and shape cities. And it covers just about every sort of facet along those lines, from design to situation to social fabric to the way we move about in cities. We're basically sedentary or we move about. They're the two things humans do in urban environments. We're looking at amenities. We're looking at how we integrate public transport. It influences our public spaces in terms of wide, open, accessible footpaths, separated cycleways, supporting that public health agenda of active transport. We're looking at public spaces where people are encouraged to linger, as I said, through landscaping, street furniture, street lighting, and so forth. And then you sort of link that in with your schools and your amenities and your public toilets and your retail environments, and on it goes. And so CPTED really does infiltrate into all of those sorts of areas. It has a lot of tentacles in that sense. I think the history of cities will show that there's no such thing necessarily as a CPTED, as a best practice city, which exemplifies CPTED as such. I think we need to acknowledge that the history of cities suggests that each architectural era has been influenced by the design doctrines of their time. So a lot of the CPTED research is sort of looking at, in many ways, failed projects that haven't implemented CPTED, particularly in some of those post-World War II public housing environments in the estates in the United Kingdom, the projects in the US cities like Chicago and St. Louis, and the banlieue in the outskirts of Paris and other cities in France. So CPTED, how it influenced the city, I'm interested in these broader sort of notions around affordability, accessibility, social cohesion, the real challenges that we have in terms of housing in the present day and age, where housing has become so unaffordable and so inaccessible to so many people. So I'm interested in what they're doing in Austria, for example. I think the housing model over there is very progressive. It's equitable, it's affordable, the housing is high quality. It's managed by limited profit housing associations. A lot of the properties are owned as part of the government's portfolio. And in Vienna, for example, up to 75% of the population are eligible for public housing. So if you integrate CPTED into those environments with all those other things going for them, you do get those really good socially mixed neighbourhoods, which I think, and also very strong on the feminist agenda too in Vienna, too, acknowledging gender equity's role in CPTED as well. So definitely the Austrian model, thumbs up for that. And also, of course, Singapore also takes on that sort of holistic model, employing CPTED as part of a very integrated, self-contained development. So they're not just looking at, you know, an apartment building and you're doing a CPTED assessment on that apartment building. You're looking at the transport that comes to that building, the range of amenities, schools, shops, parks, community spaces that accompany that development. All of these things supported by a government which supports home ownership, ethnic groups mixed together in high quality buildings, which are really well maintained and upgraded regularly. And it's that concept of environmental management and maintenance. Historically, again, a lot of the literature shows how you can have these big shiny projects to begin with, but planning and designing is very much the easy part of CPTED. I would argue that managing and maintaining environments is potentially endless, and it's often an overlooked one principle of CPTED as well. Just in terms of a specific project, one I particularly like is one known as the Saltway project in Seoul in Korea. So it's one of those classic examples of the local community finding community solutions to the issues affecting them. Seoul, of course, is a city that developed like the whole of South Korea, a country that's developed very, very rapidly in recent years. Quite a high population densities, very established nighttime economy. A lot of the nighttime economy debates around CPTED are built around the revelers, the people having a good time, alcohol-related assault and violence, street lights and public domain sort of upgrades and so forth. But a lot of often the forgotten people in those worlds are the workers, the kitchen hands, the people driving the bus, the nurses coming home from the night shift in the hospitals. They're the ones who are often impacted by the revelers in the nighttime economy. And that was the case here in this particular community in Seoul. People were coming home from working in these areas. They felt unsafe. There was fear of crime and not great social capital in the community that they lived in. So they set about on a broader agenda to create a more healthy and livable community. 30% of the women surveyed felt unsafe between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. and they had lots of dark laneways, poorly maintained, abandoned facilities, and little scope for community sort of to build and strengthen. So what they did, the local municipality set out with the local community and they put together a fear of crime map, and they mapped the places where people felt fearful. They then realised that the social capital wasn't very good because there weren't enough places for people to interact. So the local municipality built a fitness circuit around the neighbourhood. So that covered, made sure that there was that human presence in all of these spaces as often as possible. This is often a solution that we use in parks as well, trying to make sure that you give a use to spaces that might be places that are more isolated where people feel unsafe, particularly women on their own out exercising, for example. So this fitness circuit was put in place. The community were involved in planting trees, putting in lots of new LED lighting. So this created this wave, this momentum. They then, once that was built, they got sponsors on board who then provided paint and repair kits for people to work on the facades of their buildings and to repair their homes. They created, some houses were painted in yellow, and those houses were deemed as safe houses, and those houses were linked to a hotline directly to the police where people could go if they were in distress. All the social capital led to a new community centre being built. So again, that provided the basis for lots of community program and services to work out of. And at the end of that project, 79% of people felt that it had been effective in crime prevention, and 83% were satisfied that the project had received the desired outcome. So that's just a really good example, I thought, of combining those physical and social elements to create safer and better places.
Thanks, John. And Tim, yes, please add whatever you would like to.
I was just going to build on what John and Mac has said about its enhancing public confidence, the city vitality, it's supporting urban regeneration, social inclusion. I talked about embedding it in the planning and infrastructure. Most importantly, though, it's also contributing to sustainable and smart cities that we're looking to the future. So, for example, CPTED aligns with the UK's net zero strategy and smart city ambitions, and we're trying to create urban spaces not only energy efficient but socially sustainable. So, safe, well-maintained environments encourage active mobility, support mental health, promote environmental stewardship, all of our kind of third generation things. And emerging technologies, things like intelligent lighting, data-driven analytics are also been combined with CPTED to design kind of, adaptive evidence-based urban housing. So we're also looking to the future with smart cities as well as cities in general. That was it.
Thanks, Tim. So I'll now go to my Indian example for it, continue on the same concept in answer to the same concept. So when we look at the impact of CPTED on a city like New Delhi, so those of you who are familiar with the Indian society, we are a largely interdependent society. So when we talk about the socio-economic classes, there is a sense of interdependence. I mean, the higher ones need the lower ones, and vice versa. So originally, when we were really young, developmental policies used to actually provide for all classes within the socio-economically sustainable neighborhood. So you would have servant quarters, and you would have high income, lower income, middle income, all kind of played together in a neighborhood. But lately, the latest policy developments are mostly sectoral, and they are, emphasizing the marginalization and the unsustainability. I'll show you some examples very briefly, which are kind of losing the vital septed components, and somewhere or the other we believe as septed advocates that that is at the root cause of enhancing the higher crime and lowering the standards of living and growth. So, for example, this is the neighborhood that is a typical neighborhood, and you can see that the lower income groups or the hawkers, the vendors on the street are offering natural surveillance. They are livening up the place in their own interests and in the interests of their patrons who are across the place. And so this is that neighborhood, the plan, the master plan, or the, should I say, the master plan of this particular neighborhood that I showed you a picture of. And this is, as you can see, it has a kind of a comprehensive thing. It has some commercial, it has larger plots, smaller plots, urban village, commercial, everything kind of thrown in, making it a very sustainable neighborhood, which is known to lower crime and improve the standards of living and growth, where every section of society is kind of looking after each other. It's a very inclusive and a socio-economically sustainable model. On the other hand, so if we were to talk about traditional Indian planning, you have a residence unit where it used to have accommodation for their staff and open areas, and it had parking and things like that. And then you have a community level interaction where a particular neighborhood has its own community with its own socioeconomic classification and proximity to the other socioeconomic groups. And then all of these put together used to comprise a neighborhood, which has its own commercial, its own institutional, its own marketplaces, its own health facilities, and tends to be a sustainable form of planning, which is not just environmentally sustainable because it's supposed to keep itself self-sufficient. It's an economically sustainable, and it's a socially sustainable area. And when you are not traveling long distances, obviously you end up being environmentally sustainable also. So the original traditional city of New Delhi is something on this. It's an agglomeration of such traditional neighborhoods, and we are finding today that it is more livable, it's more sought after, it's boasts of better infrastructure and development. Now let's contrast and compare this. So Delhi, being the capital city, it grew from its 448 square kilometers in 1981 to about what it stands today at about 34,000 square kilometers, due to its horizontal sprawl and a lot of urban migrations and a huge population explosion. So to create more housing, we had to turn to suburbs, where we satellite towns like the Gurugram or Noida or such towns had to kind of come up, catering to the housing needs. So these were mostly high income group, but now by the governmental push they are shifting slowly to try to be more affordable. But they are creating more social damage than solution, and though they offer very high end security, these cities are actually grappling with crime. So if you look at this as an indicative master plan of the city of Gurugram, you notice that these have very crystal clear sectoral planning. You have an institutional sector, and you have a commercial sector, and you have a residential sector, which all CPTED scientists across the world know is a problem. It's not only an unsustainable environmentally, it's also socioeconomically and very unsustainable from crime point of view. You get lonely pockets, you have transport staff, you have all kinds. So this kind of real estate model of sectoral planning is creating crime, lonely areas, unsustainable on all parameters. And this is where we say that a national policy that includes CPTED would, you know, shape the house, or should we say international global policy and endorsement of the CPTED principles would only help use these very. So for example, like I said, these gated communities, we all know that gated communities can create exclusion. They create a loss of interdependence in this urban security fabric. So these gated communities tend to work on socioeconomic discrimination. They offer hardly any natural surveillance, and there is no sense of urban responsibility. They become very highly secure enclaves, but they are very, very insecure right outside. They are also breaking up the traditional Indian culture of community living, which is the biggest loss. So these are made in response to high crime, but they are based on very high fear, and they're only exaggerating that fear of crime. Also, that high level of security, the mechanical security is making them unaffordable and unsustainable. These are also heightening the socioeconomic inequities across the city and across the populace of India, and they are only exaggerating the gender disparities. So that's why India has become infamous for the women's security issues. And in response to all of this, the government started something called the Neighborhood Watch Scheme, which has turned out extremely well for India. It is extremely good instrument of CPTED to look after the entire thing, enhance and heighten the resilient community structures. And also Bhagidari is actually a sort of partnership. This is a citizen to the stakeholder partnership, which is at its best in this. And this is what we learn from the New Delhi example as representative of so many such similar context across the world. So with all this information, I'll take the question last but not the least to Juma, and like to hear his views on this discussion point that we are talking about. How does CPTED impact cities? Juma, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. We have had a very comprehensive overview of this topical area from other panelists. Perhaps the point of view that I'll make into this is really a perspective of how housing is moving away from just being considered as shelter to one that is understood as an enabler of safety, dignity, inclusion, and opportunity. This perspective underlies the overall thrust of the whole idea of sustainable urban development, and where housing is increasingly becoming the centerpiece of the sustainable urban development agenda. The backdrop to this, of course, is the over 40 years of conversation since Vancouver One, or rather Habitat One in Vancouver in 1976, when housing was understood to be simply about the built environment and one that really concerned brick and mortar issues. And over the years, this topical area has grown into the understanding of housing beyond the built environment to encompass the living environment. And more so with the urban century that we are in today, there is an increasing focus on looking at housing as part of the new social contract. So essentially, we find a concept like CPTED in its third generation, embracing ideals towards livability and social cohesion that very much integrates or align with the thinking today of adequate housing. As you mentioned rightfully, Manjari, the two principles of adequate housing around location and habitability provide a very useful lens to integrate CPTED in its third generation, and to enable the safety narrative to be understood in its comprehensive approach to territories. I feel that CPTED, as we speak today, has the ability to influence national housing policies, to begin to think of housing developments that go beyond what we see as the current models of gated neighborhoods, to one that really encompasses the city as a whole and how it enables planning, city planning for social integration and for social cohesion. I think we have the good practices of cities around the world that have understood this CPTED concept at its third generation, that could then provide themselves as laboratories to consolidate that knowledge of how CPTED can be applied on a citywide scale, on a community-based level, and that drives partnerships across the city in the spirit of co-creation of safety and security for all. I think we can be able to see ways as we go forward of documenting those city practices or city experiences that can then facilitate learning, draw out the innovations, and inform the integrated housing policy solutions that we currently are all aspiring towards. Thank you.
Much, Juma. That was very well put. So, I think to make this really conclusive and productive, we go to the last section of our discussion today. How do we want to, kind of milk this, this joint initiative and this understanding that the UN Habitat has very clearly about CPTED with the ICA, and how do you think we can come together to use CPTED to benefit the whole world? So I'll like to take this question first and foremost to Tim, and then move on to the rest of the things, and we'll end with you, Juma. So, Tim, would you like to answer that? Okay, Macca's raised her hand. So Macca, go. You could go ahead.
I'm here. I'm sorry.
There is Tim.
Okay, so you can do it the way you want, both of you.
Go ahead, Tim. Then I continue.
Okay,
Tim, we're
I
not able to
think
hear
for
you. You're
me,
breaking up.
and I,
Okay, try again now. Yeah.
okay, I'll be very brief then. I think Yuma's covered a lot of it, but I think the ICA and UN should look at integrating CPTED into a global urban policy framework so that UN Habitat incorporates our principles in the new urban agenda and the safer city programs, things, international standards and capacity building, things like ISO and how they're used so that people know what CPTED is, should be trained. We should, or the UN should be supporting evidence-based research, demonstration projects, so funding research pilot initiatives, championing inclusive and culturally responsive CPTED, so CPTED approaches that reflect diverse cultural, gender, community context. It's going well, this. I'm losing contact and coffee. Sorry. Last one, establishing potentially a global CPTED partnership platform. So with the ICA and UN, we could co-create an international CPTED platform with the ICA, dialogue, that type of thing. I'll go to a close because I'm coughing and losing contact.
Go ahead, Macca.
Well, as Tim mentioned, all the points are very relevant, and I'm so happy to finally to achieve our dream. We know each other with Yuma for so many years, and we always have spoken about that, how we can connect CPTED world with UN world and to make joint efforts. And I think now it's the moment because also CPTED, it's in a very mature moment. More mature moment because it has 3 generations, it has case studies, labs, as Yuma mentioned. So I think Team Pasco idea is a very, very good idea, Yuma, to develop a global CPTED platform together with ICA and UN to gather together these 2 big umbrellas and to define joint objective together.
Thanks, Macca. John, would you like to add to that?
Yes, well, I'll just echo the sentiments of the previous speakers that this notion of consolidating knowledge, publishing, looking at sort of investing in strategic technical assistance programs. I think, again, that point's sort of being made, how we can promote best practice into like a comprehensive CPTED compendium, if you like. I know the UN's done that on other issues of how we can provide better technical advice to other cities. I've certainly in my own work been working on publishing and promoting CPTED guidelines. They're more a generic set of guidelines that apply to 10 specific urban settings. Including housing, but separately low density housing compared to medium to high density, more mixed use developments. Though each of those domains will have different guidelines, different research underpinning those things. So providing a sort of a theoretical and a practical framework, because my background is as a practitioner, for addressing any number of situations, because that's really what we're talking about here, situations that arise in a range of urban settings, including housing. but also looking at, the urban structure of cities, how we lay out our streets and roads and sites for buildings, what we build, where and why. Looking at that active transport, how CPTED relates to walking and cycling, how it relates to integrated transport, whether you're sitting at the bus stop, whether you're catching the train, whether you're trying to get to the train station. All of these things need to be looked at. I think the nighttime economy space is something I've looked at quite extensively too. The nighttime city, it's often referred to as the economy. I prefer the term the nighttime society. I think there's a lot of work that we can do there in terms of technical assistance and fundamental things like wayfinding. If people feel lost, they tend to feel fearful. And the use of public toilets is another really big and important agenda, which has few champions, which I'm certainly very passionate about. So yeah, and obviously getting some sort of training module built around this sort of technical compendium of knowledge. CPTED is inherently teachable, I've always thought. I'm married to a drama teacher, and she's often commonly saying to me, show it, don't say it. And once people get their head around what the principles of CPTED are, then it's a very immersive concept. You can take people into those places and we can learn from each other. And I think that's the real key. It's very easy to come at these sorts of problems or issues as an expert, but it's only when you're sort of jogging on the spot and talking to people who use the space, who understand the space, that those perspectives become much more clearer. So yeah, developing some sort of training module to accompany any sort of guidelines to sort of put these approaches into practice, I think it would be a good thing to do.
Thanks, John. And my last bit, I will just present quickly, take you through that without wasting time. So, what are the recommendations that we would like to take learning from the Indian model is, we are all aware, we have been attending master classes for ISO 22341 for the last 2 weeks. Tomorrow is the third and last session for that. So in continuation of what Tim and Maka and John have been saying, yes, I think what makes sense is to make some kind of a guidance or a standard which kind of guides those who are probably not CPTED educated, who are not CPTED literate, maybe like India till a few years ago, they haven't even heard about it. So it would be, I believe, very, very, very useful. So, and I came across in the course of my doctoral pursuits, I found that UN DG, which is a development group, has already made a building performance manual, like the one on your screen, for the design and construction of common premises office buildings. So similarly, if we could do something which kind of guides member countries on how to go about housing, whether it is affordable or it is high end, of course, I'm sure the impetus would be on the affordable one. So that, this kind of a development uses its limited resources in the most judicious way, and people who are opting for living in these communities actually live a secure life without having to spend extra. They don't have the resources, but they deserve the security and the crime prevention. So some best practices or simple checklists which would kind of offer design, constructional and operational advice in terms of maintenance, especially things like landscape, which tend to get forgotten. Now, we have just recently done something similar to this in India in their National Building Code version 2025, which is currently under publication. We've laid down some simple best practices in simple language, even for those who don't understand the term CPTED. Simple checklists that they can just follow while designing and be sure that they have done things in the right way. On the other hand, and we've also gone ahead and gone into the maintenance aspects, which tend to be the ones which kind of go awry in many developments. So these from the Indian example, we learn that contextualization is very important. So we cannot have one size fits all, probably. So, but we can use all our resources with the experts available at ICA, which are from across the world. We have so many chapters from almost every part of the globe who would help us contextualize this knowledge and put it to best use for those across the world who need it most. You see, we are targeting those who cannot afford expensive security. They are the ones who use transport systems, the sidewalks, they are the ones who deserve it the most. And that's where I would like to close my narration for the day and take all this information to the boss, Chuma, to sum it up as he deems best.
Yes, Manjari. So I think this is a credible way to look at it and to understand how such a discussion could advance in its in continuity. And I think the question of the platform that was raised is something which is worthwhile to think about. In this moment of time, we have been encouraging the establishment of knowledge hubs around topical areas that we think have generated enough practices, a critical mass of practices, but that can actually be facilitated by cities peering with other cities. And so the city of Paris and the city of Nairobi, for instance, have twinned together to establish a global knowledge hub on social housing. I think in a similar approach, we could consider exploring ideas of how cities that have already generated good illustrious practices around housing and CPTED principles and actions can begin to think of themselves aligning with the local universities and the local entities there to establish a sort of hub that facilitates global learning and that can bring out the innovative solutions, can take on technical solutions around housing studios with other cities to give appropriate responses to their policies and programs. I think the moment is ripe, is now, to begin to think of those type of knowledge hubs and to interest cities who we know have the capacities, like Sydney, to consider taking up such a challenge of establishing such a global knowledge hub.
Thanks, Juma. And I think with that, we are just ready to go into the Q&A session. And I'll take the first question. Jasmine had posted another question earlier, but then she's removed the other question and just second part of it. So she says, I now realize that I mistakenly put housing problems and housing shortage together as one. What it probably shouldn't be when connected to separate solutions, since it's more human scale. Though I'm still curious if there are any thoughts on if septed could play a role in the solving of the shortage also. So any thoughts on that? Anybody would like to take that question? Can raise your hand. I'll take it to you, or just switch on your mics and you can speak. So any thoughts of how septed can reduce shortage? So I'll start answering. In the meanwhile, any of you can raise your hand. So in India, it's actually very, very relevant. Like I showed you, the housing for all concept, which is the uh, Prime Minister P. May, it's called Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, where he wants to make housing affordable and accessible to all. Obviously, you can understand that the cost of each flat or each residence is the important thing to make it accessible and affordable for all sections, especially the marginalizations and marginalized and disadvantaged groups. So you can understand that when you have land parcels which are given to real estate for development, they would want to milk it to the highest. They would want to extract maximum revenue and maximum returns from that investment that they've made. So they obviously start making them into highly gated and highly secure avenue enclaves, like I showed in my presentation. So this obviously, this is not just an initial cost, but it's a recurring running cost to keep them so highly secure. And then you're losing out on contributing to the, like we all know about gated communities. So all those negatives kind of kick in. But when you're trying to use that plot of land and make it into an affordable housing, obviously that level of security cannot be, achieved and maintained on a long term. So if those affordable housing pockets are designed as per CPTED principles, you will save on that initial cost, you will save on that running cost, and obviously really be able to make these places affordable and affordably sustainable in the long term. So yes, CPTED can make a huge difference, especially where we're talking about housing for all and making them affordable. Maka, your thoughts, please.
It's a very good question, and connecting with your answer, Manjari, I have been applying CPTED these past 25 years in the Hispanic region in very vulnerable settlements of housing areas, slums areas, informal settlements, and of course, how CPTED has been an incredible tool to increase territorial rights, for example, democracy among people, participatory process. And I remember a very short story of a place in Rio, in Brazil. There was a very vulnerable settlement, but with a very strong social cohesion. And we only had money for painting housing. And we did a participatory CPTED diagnosis, and one of the owners of a very damaged house says, I am so sad because my house has no identity. And we asked this person, what is your dream? And he says, I want to have a white house like the president of the United States. So we start painting the house with a white color. So a simple response, but the attitude of the complete community changed a lot. So change accepted, well applied, can do an incredible change in vulnerable settlements. You're mute, Manjari.
Thanks, Maka. That's a great example. Very simple, but very, very poignant. Okay, so we have a question from Suresh Babu that says, can you give more light on CPTED concept? So anybody would like to answer that? So, Suresh Babu, actually, CPTED, we expect that you understand the concept of CPTED, and it's a longer discussion if I have to start explaining the CPTED concept here to you. But I'm very happy to engage with you separately. You are free to write to me or give me a call. I will be very happy to address your question offline in a longer discussion, because we can't start explaining the concept here, but yes, we are here on an evolved aspect of it, and I'll be very happy to take that up separately with you. Please write into me at manjari.kapoor@septed.net. As simple as that. I'll put my email ID also in the chat group. Okay, so there's another question from, again, a very good friend of ours, Dr. Terence Love from Perth. He says worldwide crime rates for any forms of crime, which is burglary, theft of vehicles, non-family violence, are falling by around 3% on a year-long term. And this applies also to informal settlements. However, crime rates are high and increasing in family-based and gender-based violence, especially in informal settlements. I'm interested in CPTED solutions that others have found effective in reducing the latter problems in formal and informal housing settlements. Anybody wants to take that? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah,
Only
go
one
ahead.
initial. Okay.
Go ahead, John. Tim, I think you're still breaking up. If you could just fix that, we'll come back to you. John, please take that.
Okay, try.
So I can't really comment on informal settlements as such, but certainly, yeah, we are seeing rates of family and sexual violence increasing, certainly in parts of Australia, and certainly in regional parts of Australia. In fact, rates of domestic violence in New South Wales are twice as big a problem as they are in the city. So there's something going on out there. We always try and solve these complex issues in a number of ways. So again, your local municipalities will set up their interagencies. They'll set up a meeting of all the services who'll meet regularly and look at how they can work together, promote their services, work on community projects. Areas, some local governments are starting to use the public domain to raise awareness of issues, public art, murals, that kind of thing. We've seen a project I saw recently of the Red Bench project, so very specific, a brightly painted red bench as a nod to domestic violence awareness and sexual harassment awareness as well. The other thing that we're doing, sort of like, I run courses in CPTED, but I also run a course in creating safer public places for women and girls, because we can make as many changes to the physical environment as possible with CCTV and lights, and obviously work with women and girls on specific sites where they work and visit and so forth, to look at those sorts of improvements. But really, it comes down to that notion of the active bystander and what that means, and if people know what to do in that situation, it's a much more difficult sell. It's a difficult problem to sell. A lot of men think domestic violence is a woman's problem. They think of it as a problem of other men, and not something to do with them. But if what we're trying to do, certainly in Australia, is promote these issues as a societal problem, that this could be your daughter, your wife, your girlfriend, whoever. Try and personalise the issue as much as possible, and look at the strategies that you can do, the five Ds, as they're referred to in the literature, for how you can intervene in terms of your role as the citizen.
Thanks, John. That was a great answer. Tim, would you like to go now?
Yeah, I think John's done a far better answer than I was going to suggest, but certainly we've had those kind of issues and problems. An example might be public transport in the UK and sexual harassment of women, etc. And it's one of the signs of success is their confidence now to report those crimes, and they weren't reporting them in the first place. So again, it's a sign of the confidence the community at a local level may be seeing an increase of those crimes being reported initially. So again, you can't rely totally on all of the statistics. You have to have an array of evidence to ensure you're understanding the issue in the first place and then getting your intervention correctly.
Thank you, Tim. That was a very, very well answered.
Over.
Terence, I'd like to actually, there is a short video. I think when you talk about informal settlements, I think there's no better context than India to understand informal settlements. But since you're talking about within the family or gender based, you see, when you have informal settlements, there's no really definition of a house, because a house is just a house which holds things. Otherwise, their life is mostly outdoors. So I'll just share this short video, which I also presented at the ICA conference in May earlier this year. Maybe it'll give you a peek into what CPTED can really do for informal settlements and family and gender-based crimes. So allow me to just share a short video from India about the Indian context.
the capital of India, is a metropolitan city and a leading destination for travel and tourism. Delhi has been a capital for at least 7 known empires and has acted as a symbol for many rulers to establish their power. Current city of Delhi is a collective mix of many cities and some small villages. The villages that Delhi has annexed over the years of its expansion have grown with time, but with their own jurisdiction. These villages are known as urban villages. There are, however, some neglected and underutilized spaces which often become breeding grounds for criminal activities which create a nuisance for the public. One such urban village is Hasanpur. This site is a public park within Hasanpur village, which is the only breakout space for the inhabitants of these closely packed cluster of dwelling units. When the site was analyzed for conditions of security and infrastructure, the people felt that the place was unsafe and lacked basic facilities. As architecture students of the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, we voluntarily took up an initiative to revitalize the park of Hasanpur. Our aim was to increase the livability of the area and make it more secure. On our first visit to Hasanpur, we had no idea about the nature of the site. Through casual conversations with the inhabitants of the village, we found out about their desire for a public open space that rescued them from their enclosed, trapping environment. We interacted mainly with the women and children of Hasanpur because they tend to be more sensitive and exposed to the issues of safety and security. In our site studies, we concluded that the park was dysfunctional because of the following reasons: low maintenance, dead spaces that do not have proper surveillance, misuse of spaces for antisocial activities. Then, we carefully mapped out the space with respect to its usage based on time of the day, activity patterns, and different age groups. The whole process involved back and forth interactions with the locals of the village. Since the final output was meant for them, it was integral that we hear their opinions and include them in our conception. As we started working, the locals got inspired by our enthusiasm, involvement, and hard work in trying to make a difference to their lives, and began contributing actively. Since the locals of the village were involved in the whole process, a sense of ownership was thus established and strengthened. These are a few of our interventions on the site: cleaning of the park, breaking up the locked gates, creating opportunities for interaction, creating seating spaces, increasing possibilities of natural surveillance, making the space more vibrant and inviting, swings and play areas for kids, placing dustbins because cleanliness ensures visitors and hence the success of our initiative. Although it is an ongoing process and we are still studying the long-term effects of the interventions, this is the immediate impact that has been achieved.
बच्चे तो नहीं खेलते थे, बस यहाँ कूड़ा करकट और लोग बहुत ज़्यादा दारू पीना, जुआ खेलना वगैरह वगैरह, इन सब चीज़ों में लोगों का ज़्यादा ध्यान था। बट इस चीज़ को हमने यहाँ पर चेंज किया, बहुत अच्छी तरह से कर रहे हैं। और सब कोई ना कोई सपोर्ट आप लोगों का है कि आप लोगों ने बहुत अच्छा किया, बहुत बेटर। और इसमें सबसे ज़्यादा सपोर्ट आप लोगों का है कि आप लोगों ने बहुत अच्छा किया।
So I hope it that kind of captures that, in informal settlement, the problem is that they feel that they are homing in on that place like a squatter. They are not owning it. They don't have that sense of belonging. But this kind of an intervention actually helps them take ownership, feel a sense of belonging, and they were able to, kind of recapture their place, make it more livable, make it more their own, and obviously then that makes it more safe and secure. So that's just a very small example, but yeah, that's how it goes for informal settlements. And there are so many. This is just this grassroots, because the students didn't have funds, they didn't have much except for the knowledge of CPTED, and so they could actually make a long lasting impression on the people there. So any other thoughts, yeah, Maka, you have your hand up, please go ahead.
Yes, I want to thank you everyone for this incredible discussion. I think this is the starting point of an incredible joint venture initiative that we will move forward. I like the video very much. It shows a clear example of the change that CPTED produces when it is well applied. And India, as you mentioned, Manjari, has all the challenges, as well as the South Hemisphere settlements, as we mentioned. I want to thank John, Yuma, and Tim for the incredible experience and knowledge that you shared today. Unfortunately, I need to go out of the webinar, but I thank you so much for everything. And I enjoyed it very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Maka.
you, Maka.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maka. Thank you. And yes, we are also closing the webinar. We've just taken a few minutes above. Juma, would you want any closing thoughts?
Perhaps just to sum up and say that I think the road now is towards the World Urban Forum. And as we know the relevancy of the topic to this whole idea of CPTED and cities, it'll be important for us to start thinking of a roadmap in that direction and how to engage cities in a much more succinct way. I think it would be good, for instance, to think about a 3-4 page documentary of cities, documentation of cities about how they apply the CPTED concept in their policy frameworks. And it will be good to have that as a leverage. I think cities like Seoul, South Korea, cities like Stockholm would be already good starters in this endeavor, and a city like Durban in South Africa.
Thank you, Juma. Thank you for those closing remarks. And with that, I thank all our esteemed panelists for the day. So much time, so much effort has gone into your contributions to this joint initiative. Really, really thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you to UN Habitat for including us in the Urban October and having us heard. And with that, last and but not the least, I thank all the spectators who have joined us from across the world to hear us live, participate with us, interact with us, and also those who will be attending the the recording. We will be sharing that soon enough. And my personal email ID is shared with you on the chat now as I'm talking, and you all already have the central ICA email ID, which is office@septed.net, which was on the poster. So any queries, if you miss my or any other email IDs, you can always write into that and that will come straight to us. Don't worry about it. At this point, I would also like to take the opportunity to add here that we have our last and final masterclass about the ISO 22341 tomorrow, which is coming from our Mexican expert Mercedes in terms of the application. We have heard 2 weeks, we have heard the theories and the strategy behind the ISO. We have the last segment of that tomorrow from Mexico, Mercedes. So don't miss joining us for that. If you haven't registered so far, please go right ahead and do that straight after this. And if you want details about it, you can always go to our website, which is www.septed.net. So I thank firstly our esteemed panel for their time and efforts, and our viewers from across the world. And I would like to close with a video about ICA. If you haven't yet joined the ICA, now is as good time as any other to do so.